quick note before today's show. We have transformed our entire platform to respond to the current crisis and increased our production of both podcast episodes and blogs, but we cannot do so without your support. Please consider making a donation or contributing as a volunteer to support our active engagement at this critical time.
Doris Swam is a researcher in the field of human rights, peace, and economic development. She was interviewed on May 5th. We really need humanitarian aid in Myanmar. Even ordinary people are struggling now. Even though there had been some speculation in the media about a coup happening, I didn't really believe it. The night before, both power and internet cut out in the area where I was staying, but it still didn't occur to me that a military takeover was about to take place. So I was really shocked when I heard the news the following morning. I have never experienced a coup myself, but given the Myanmar military's record of human rights violations, I immediately realized that the situation was about to get worse, and I became very sad. At the time of the coup, I was living in Myitkyina and planning to travel to Yangon to meet my work supervisor. But I knew that wouldn't be possible anymore, so I moved to my grandmother's house to stay with my family. In the weeks following the coup, none of us felt like talking much. We couldn't even eat or sleep properly. We were all scared. I wasn't able to concentrate on my work. Actually, I wasn't able to do anything. I would spend all day, every day checking for updates on Facebook. Before the coup, when we were only fighting the COVID-19 pandemic, I felt like it was okay since it was a global problem. But now, I'm so disappointed and angry. We have to deal with a double crisis in Myanmar. It's not fair. The country's economy is in ruins, and so many young people's education has been postponed indefinitely. Everything is so uncertain now. I worry about the future of my younger cousins, nieces, and nephews. I have lost hope of achieving my personal goals too. But luckily, I can still continue working remotely for my organization in Yangon. In Myitkyina, there have been protests and the CDMs since the beginning, and they're still going. But most older people don't participate anymore. Only the youth are left. That's why young people are being targeted. Just the other day, 10 were arrested while organizing themselves at a market. By now, there are over 100 young people in jail here, including journalists and humanitarian workers. In addition, the KIA and the military are still fighting. So many vulnerable groups in the region need help. Women, government teachers participating in the CDM, IDBs, etc. I have been helping to channel money coming from donors abroad to local women's organizations. Otherwise, I don't go out much, only when I really have to. The gate that I need to pass to get downtown or to the market has been very thoroughly checked by security, and the military basically arrest anybody they want. I always hide sensitive photos on my phone and make sure they will not find anything suspicious. During these difficult times, I don't get any specific psychological support, but just the fact that I am with my family and we're facing the situation together helps a lot. It would have been much more challenging for me to do this alone. For a long time, I have been away from home, living and working in many different places in Myanmar and abroad, never having the opportunity to spend months like this with them, so I'm enjoying it. As a Christian, praying and night worships also help me, as well as talking to my friends. We really need humanitarian aid in Myanmar. Even ordinary people are now struggling. Collecting money from inside the country is only a short-term solution, but definitely not sufficient in the long term. I also don't think this is the right time to discuss development, but instead to advocate for humanitarian aid to support the vulnerable people across the country.
I'm very pleased to be speaking with an internationally award-winning photojournalist who has captured some of the iconic scenes of the reality in Myanmar over the last decade, and whose work since the coup has landed him one of the most prestigious honors in photojournalism. Due to safety concerns, he has not granted many interviews, and even in this one, we are going to have to be careful about what we say and how we say it, which is a shame because it obscures many of his real accomplishments. But in any way, we'll do the best we can, and we're so happy to have you on and to go where we can with the discussion that follows.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me on the podcast, and I'm really happy to talk, and I hope I can talk as openly as I can. But yeah.
Yeah. So let's go back a little bit through your career first before we get to present day. You had been in university. We won't mention the field or the university, somewhere in Myanmar. And at some point, you decided, according to my understanding, to drop out and become a photojournalist when Myanmar started going through its transition. What led to this decision?
Yeah, so I was like in my final year, and I when I first picked up a camera, and it was actually like, yeah, because I was like, I just wanted to photograph, like, make some, try landscape photography or like sceneries and stuff, because this is what I knew photography is about. Like you either do portraits or like fashion or landscapes, and I was interested in like landscapes and stuff. But then, so I picked up a camera, and the good thing was that time there was we just started having the internet, and I could Google. It takes some time, but I could Google like digital photography, and I could learn, even though I there's no big like foundation for photography. There's like no school for photography and all, but I could still use internet to learn. And because my parents were also a little worried that I would change my career once, like to be a photographer. So they didn't like want me to attend any like photography class or anything. So, but then I saw. There was like a free photography workshop. It was actually about photo storytelling, and I signed up for the workshop because it was free, and I didn't know what it was, like what it meant. I just thought it's a photography workshop. But then that was the first time I was, because at the workshop I see like all the photojournalistic works from the region and from the like international photographers, and that was the first time I was blown away, and I realized that this whole thing exists, as like photojournalism or telling stories with photos existed, and I was really interested, fascinated. So after the workshop, I remember I said this to the instructor. I said, I want to be a photojournalist. I don't know what it means, but I just said that. And then that was 2010, 2011. And then in 2012, I remember like there was so Aung San Suu Kyi like came out of house arrest, and she went around the country for a by-election campaign. And I decided to follow her campaign and photograph, like it was, because it's something that I've never seen. My parents have talked about her a lot since I was a child, and I've never really seen her in person. And it was really a great opportunity to also to try and take pictures. Also my friends were like saying, yeah, let's go and take pictures. This is going to be historical. So I went to Mandalay, I went to Molemya, and I went to I went all around the country following as she went for the by-election campaign. And at the end of the campaign, I started working. At the end of the campaign, I got an offer to start working for an international news agency, and this is when I just I realized I'm already in it, and that's how I started. And I just said I will go back to the university and whatever I was pursuing after that. But it's been almost 10 years now since I started. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great introduction to where you've landed and what you've done. And you obviously went through training at Alliance Française, and then you went out and did your own things, experimented. I'm sure you, as far as you were able to get online at that time, looked at examples, and along the way, you've learned a lot and become quite accomplished. This is, of course, an oral platform, so we're going to have to encourage listeners to look. I was going to say we'll give a reference, but of course we can't give a reference because we're shielding part of your identity. So we'll have to figure that out after the interview airs. What exactly pictures we put on and what links we give. But in any case, as far as we're able to do on an oral platform, can you describe for the listeners what you're looking for when you take pictures? How have you mastered your craft? What is your style when you're trying to capture something and bring some message home? What makes a good picture?
So for me, since I started doing photography professionally as a photojournalist, so I had because that was, I would say, I started as soon as the country opened up, but then working for an international news agency, I had to cover a lot of different issues that was happening in Myanmar, and of course, some of these issues involve about the Rohingya and about the conflict, and so it's I had the chance to come to work on all these different issues along the years. So for me, it's just photography is just really just a tool. It's a tool to to tell stories and to talk about it's because I think photos can communicate at many different levels, and very often if it's powerful, if it's a powerful photograph, it can communicate at a deeper level, and so it's my work is just about trying to tell the story in the best possible way that I can, using these photos as a visual storytelling tool.
Right. One of the things I saw in some article describing how you went about trying to take pictures, which really stuck in my mind, was that you were trained on landscape photos, but you wanted to capture social issues. And when I saw you describe that, then I started looking at your pictures. I saw that, and I'm not any kind of trained photographer, but in my untrained eye, it looked like that was what was happening in a lot of the pictures I saw, that there were these two elements of a landscape that was providing context and background, and then a foreground of human emotion, interaction, some kind of story that was taking shape within that landscape. Would that be a correct characterization, or how would you alter that?
Well, yeah. So sometimes I would do landscape photos as part of a larger story, and since I started working as a visual storyteller or photojournalist, the one main thing that I always fascinated by, one thing that I'm really interested about is just people, and this is what I like photographing, and it can be very, very often it's ordinary people living an extraordinary life, or people from the most remote areas in the country, but it's always about the people, and this is so I always try to get as close as possible to the people, and this is really what I try to focus on. Yeah, so that's why, sometimes you'll see some landscape, when I'm trying to take a step back and stuff like that. But it's always about people that I photograph. Yeah.
Right, and it's because it's about people. Another of your tactics or your strategy when you go and photograph, as I understood from what I read before, is that you like to actually live with the people that you're photographing. And this is apparently uncommon for photojournalists coming into a place where they often stay at hotels or stay away. But for the most part, even in very difficult places, which we'll get into in a moment, you've insisted on actually staying and living with the people as you photograph them. Why do you find that important?
I think as a photographer, I can, when I go to like photograph, a group of people in their living their own life in their community, I'm of course like a stranger coming with a, camera and, coming into their privacy. And the best thing I can say is I want to take your picture and I want to try and tell your story. And but I think like in the pictures, you can really tell how much, how close you get to the people, or how much you understand about the story, because we're not just like capturing things as it is and like showing. I mean, of course, like we try to capture what, as a photographer, I try to capture what I, what I understood of, of the story or about the people. So I think it's really important for me to, it's to not just like go in and start like clicking or, pressing the shutter button. It's important for me to like, it's just like, as I've said, it's because it's like the camera is just a tool. So it's not about like, it's not even about photography. It's about like, communicating with these people and getting to know them and trying to like, tell their story in, the most like justifiable way. So I think it's really, that's why I like to spend time, so when I go to like, for example, when I go to, like this place, this long-term project that I've always that I've worked on for many years. I would always go back and I would know the people there and So I mean, I also like really like through photography. It also gives me the opportunity to like learn about them and learn about the stories. And it's not, I think this is actually the greatest thing about my work is that my job is that like, I get to learn all these stories from all these different people. And so that's why I like to spend time and, to be in the crowd, be with them. Yeah.
Right. And you've also described how you much more prefer doing in-depth reporting than just covering a story and moving on, which should bring you well suited to the podcast because this is a long-form discussion, not a 5-minute soundbite. So kind of similar methodology in that approach. And just as you are trying to capture many different scenes and people and bring their realities, so also we're trying to do with the different voices that we bring out there. And along those lines, through your photojournalism work in the last 10 years, you have traveled extensively throughout the country of Myanmar to all different kinds of communities and places that probably you would not have any reason or access to go otherwise. So can you say a bit about those travels and that experience and what you learned from that? What was uncomfortable? What was revealing? What was it like to undertake such extensive travels as a photojournalist?
Yeah, so I was like in my final year, and I when I first picked up a camera, and it was actually like because I was like I just wanted to photograph like make some try landscape photography or like sceneries and stuff, because this is what I knew photography is about. Like you either do portraits or like fashion or landscapes, and I was interested in like landscapes and stuff. But then so I picked up a camera, and the good thing was that time there was like we just started having the internet, and I could Google. It takes some time, but I could Google like digital photography, and I could learn. Even though I there is no big like foundation for photography. There's like no school for photography and all, but I could still use internet to learn. And because my parents were also a little worried that I would change my career once, like to be a photographer. So they didn't like want me to attend any like photography class or anything. So, but then I saw. There was like a free photography workshop. It was actually about photo storytelling, and I signed up for the workshop because it was free, and I didn't know what it was like, what it meant. I just thought it's a photography workshop, but then that was the first time I was, because at the workshop I see like all the photojournalistic works from the region and from the like international photographers, and that was the first time I was blown away, and I realized that this whole thing exists, as like photojournalism or telling stories with photos existed, and I was really interested, fascinated. So after the workshop, I remember I said this to the instructor. I said I want to be a photojournalist. I don't know what it means, but I just said that. And then that was 2010, 2011. And then in 2012, I remember like there was so Aung San Suu Kyi like came out of house arrest, and she went around the country for by-election campaign. And I decided to follow her campaign and photograph, like it was, because it's something that I've never seen. My parents have talked about her a lot since I was a child, and I've never really seen her in person. And it was really a great opportunity to also to try and take pictures. Also my friends were like saying, yeah, let's go and take pictures. This is going to be historical. So I went to Mandalay, I went to Molonyan, and I went to, I went all around the country following as she went for the by-election campaign. And at the end of the campaign, I started, working. At the end of the campaign, I got an offer to start working for an international news agency. And this is when I just, I realized I'm already in it, and that's how I started. And I just said I will go back to the university and whatever I was pursuing after that. But it's been almost 10 years now since I started. Yeah. So.
Yeah, that leads into my next question, where I was wondering what it's like for many of your subjects when you're taking the picture, and then conversely, what it's like for those viewers within the country who see it. Basically, this is looking at both sides of the camera. So as you're preparing to take a picture, after you take it, the subjects, the people that are behind the camera that you're capturing, what their reaction is. And I'm sure it's not one reaction, it's diverse. And then once that picture is finished and printed, what you've learned about the reaction in the country to some of your photography and your work.
Well, yeah, that's where I think it's really important for me to try and understand that's where it's important for me to just walk in as a photographer and start shooting, start making images. But that's where it's really important for me to try and understand the story myself, so that when I take the pictures, and when the pictures are published, and when the story is told, people really need to understand it in the most accurately possible way, so it's like for example, when I go to a drug shooting gallery in the jade mines. There, people really know that what they don't, they're not sure, they like being photographed. But then I try to explain what I'm doing, and then some people, they want to they know that this is it's not a good thing they're doing, but then at the same time they want people to know that this is happening, so they're willing to have the picture taken, just so that other people in other places know what's happening in Pakistan. And yeah, so I think it's like it's sometimes like for example in the Rohingya camps, it's always like quite difficult to like taking pictures there and trying to tell a story, because like most of the people in Myanmar had like a very different view on the Rohingya issue. So yeah, like there are really these tricky situations, where I have to be really careful with how I portray them and how I present the story.
And do you know anything about how your work has been received by a Burmese audience?
Yeah, like it's I think like for example when the some stories like the jade mines, the audience were like really when it was like, I mean, it was mostly published like abroad and in foreign media, but then when it was published within Myanmar, then like I could see that like many people were shocked to learn this learn about this. And like people were like, also, some people say, oh yeah, no, we never knew like this is this existed, this happened in our country. And it's I mean, like it's in this situation, I'm very happy to see that like like that this like people learning something through my photos. Yeah, where and in difficult stories. There's also like difficult stories, like like for example about the Rohingya, and there's one time I got like a lot of, I took a picture of like a Rohingya mother and with her malnutrition, her baby suffering from malnutrition, and that time, like even though I thought the picture was very like strong and it's like the story is heartbreaking as well. But like, many people, they had a very different view, towards Rohingya. So, I got a lot of like bad comment and criticism as well. I mean, it's not me, but it's just, it's like, yeah, like there are like different issues and different reactions from people, of course. Yeah.
Right. So you've referenced two of the biggest stories that you worked on with Jade and Rohingya, and so I want to take them one by one and learn a bit about your work and these issues before we get to the present day issue of the coup, which assure listeners we're definitely getting to, because that's also quite interesting and important. But looking at the experience in documenting the Jade camps in Kachin state, you note that this is a multi-billion-dollar industry. It's estimated at $31 billion. It's a figure that we can't even really understand what that looks like. It has been noted as being half of the national revenue of Myanmar, so that puts things somewhat into perspective. Can you share something about your initial impression upon arriving at these Jade camps in Kachin state?
Well, when I first arrived there in 2013, I was like, it's like when I got to Phuket, where the jade mines are, I was blown away to see this like lunar kind of landscapes and all these and people appear really small. It's almost like ants going over a block sweet candy or something like that. But then it's in my camera's viewfinder, it appears like that. And then there's all these like machines, and it's just like it's really like something that I've never seen before. And over there they say like mountains disappear within days or weeks, and then and it becomes like really big lakes, and so there's really no normal landscape in Pakistan, because it's really heavily mined with hundreds and hundreds of like vehicles and mining machines, which are really big. And I mean, at that time I didn't know about the figures and the numbers, but I knew that like this is really something big, but not many people know about it and know the scale of it. Like from my point of view, like before getting there myself. Like, Pakistan is known as a place for where, like, young men would try, go there to become, with a dream, like to find a stone that would change their life. So, everybody wants to go there and become a Lauban. Lauban is a word they call there for, like, it's a Chinese word they use there for, people, for like rich people. So, people would, like, young men would go there with a dream to find the shortcut to wealth. And so, like, but then when I actually arrived there, it's not all that, it's not all that story anymore. It's really, like, tough, like, terrain. The work looks very, like, deadly, and actually, like, people, like, hundreds of people die every year from, like, landslides, especially in the monsoon season. And there's a lot of, like, drug issue as well, because heroin is cheaply and almost openly available. And then there's the conflict between the Kachin Independence Army and the Myanmar military that's been going for many years. So I found myself, like, at the center of this story with all these, like, different issues, and then, of course, like, $31 billion is the number that came later on in the report by the Global Witness. And it's just really it was really incredible and shocking that this kind of an industry still exists in this in the 21st century.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned how when you went there, you didn't quite know everything about it. And to piggyback on that, I think of all the issues that were coming out of Myanmar and what was a very eventful last 10 years, this was probably not in the top 5 or possibly even the top 10 of the issues that were being talked about and reported on, concerned over. Of course, those who knew about the jade issue knew how incredibly important it was and how many elements were brought into it, as you learned when you reported there. But it wasn't one of those lead carrying stories. And to be fair, there were a lot of other important things going on in the country, but you referenced all these things that come into it, that you have so much heroin there. Some workers are actually paid in heroin. You have the IDPs, people being displaced because they live around that area or near slave labor. Extremely dangerous conditions. A lot of the ethnics are the ones who are facing it, and despite this being a projected $31 billion industry, there's not even enough infrastructure there for a basic school or electricity 24 hours a day. So the inequity is also quite shocking. And to bring it into more of a political landscape, even geopolitical, and perhaps where we are today, in your reporting, it was referenced that during the transition period, Aung San Suu Kyi was quite concerned about what was going on in the NLD, about the jade mines, and wanting to wrest control away from the military, who was equally concerned that they would have to get as much as they could, as fast as they could, so before they lost control of it. And that one of the things that really struck me in learning more about it was this idea, this push that there was a desire to want to share access and make it more equitable and make sure that the different groups were also receiving their fair share. And I was just looking at this and thinking, like, why would rich Chinese businessmen or powerful Burmese generals, why would they ever want to give up what is this golden piggy bank that just keeps producing and keeps producing? What incentive would they ever have to want to share this and decrease this kind of endless source of profits that are breaking the backs of so many people underneath them? And looking from that perspective, it seems really quite depressing.
Yeah, no, it is, like, also, so yeah, it's like, I mean, thanks for mentioning all these like important issues and factors around the jade mines, and of course, like, all these, like, billions of dollars. The biggest issue of in this story is that, like, like, apart, beside all the like, the drug problem, the conflict, and and all the human rights abuses surrounding the story. Like, one of the biggest issues is all these billions of dollars, like, going away without like, the country actually getting anything through the taxes, because most of this, the jade has been smuggled across the border, and the money was going directly into the pockets of the people with like links to the military, military and Chinese companies that are backing up the Myanmar companies from abroad, and so it's all these like money could have been spent in the rebuilding of the country.
Yeah.
But no, it was all like going away, just disappearing away. Yeah.
Right. And reference before this interview, we share a mutual friend in Motunaung, currently the Deputy Minister of Energy and Electricity in the NUG. I had a prior interview with him for those that are interested. And one of the things that really struck me from talking to him and the perspective he shared was how focused he was on in seeing natural resources as a key area that, if managed correctly, given the wealth of natural resources in Myanmar, could profoundly lead to peace and sustainability, and what he had spent so much of his career working on. And certainly he's looking at natural resources across the country in all areas. But if you just hone in specifically on jade, that's certainly a part of his field of what he's examining, and how mismanaging something like jade is leading to greater inequity, greater instability, greater turmoil and conflict, but if managed correctly can do so much for so many people. And what I'm wondering now, and you might not have the answer to this, but I'm wondering if you've heard anything in the last 9 months since the coup about the status of what's going on with these jade mines at the moment.
I saw that during when there were protests across the country everywhere, like there was also like protests in the jade mines, and I see like all these jade miners who were normally mostly only interested in finding raw jade stones. They were also very much involved in the protests, and it was very strong. And there was like the crackdowns by the military, and it was like Pakan was also like part of the whole because normally whatever happens in other parts of the country, in Pakan is just about the mining continuing, and people just want to keep mining. But in the past 9 months, like they've been very much involved. And I actually, like, it's the last time I heard about Pakan was when they cut off the telecoms in over there, and since then actually I haven't heard much.
Right. Okay. So moving on to the next area of sensitive subjects you covered before the coup is Rohingya. And you went to those camps and took pictures of a reality that many Burmese back home in the cities didn't necessarily want to see. And when you went to these Rohingya camps, you made the decision here, as you did in the Jade camps and other places, to stay locally, which meant that you were actually staying in the camps among the people. And of course, there are very fraught relations, given recent history between Bamar and Rohingya. So I'm curious what it was like for you, the experience of staying side by side with Rohingya, not just photographing them, but living among them for your time while you were there.
Well, I was, because I don't speak the language, and so I have to work with a translator or a fixer who would help me go around within the camps and show me where things are happening in the camp, and also so that's why it's I need to spend even more time looking into this. And also but there's every night I have to I would be spending all day there, but I have to go out of the camp every night because by 7 o'clock the camps would close for visitors. So I think I felt that it's this story, it's quite, it's also the issue it's being very differently viewed among other, most of the people in Myanmar. So I need, and me being, I'm also, because I'm also in Myanmar, Bamar. So I also need to understand myself what the story. So I need to talk to as many people as possible, and as I need to see, because many people were saying, all the stories coming out of the camps, or the stories about the Rohingya are mostly biased reporting from international media, but well, for me to go past that, I have to I believe that I have to talk to as many people as possible and spend as much time as possible. Yeah.
Right. And how was that experience like? We talked a bit about going to the jade camps and how the landscape and the human drama that was playing out in the jade camps, what an impact that made on you personally, and then how you were able to capture that feeling and impression that it made on you into your photographs. Rohingya is Rohingya, the people, the camps, the geography, everything is very different from the jade camps in Kachin, and yet the similarity is it can also make, I've never been to either, but from what I've understood, it can make a very profound effect on someone arriving there even within the first 5 minutes. So what was the experience of coming into interaction with Rohingya and the Rohingya camps for the first time? What made an impression on you?
Well, because I remember this trip in 2014 when I went there, and there was a huge health crisis in the camps because the authorities and the locals they kicked out some of the NGO operations that were going on inside the camps, the NGOs that were providing healthcare services to the IDPs. They had to stop the operations. So that time there was a lot of deaths and sicknesses going on in the camps. People were dying from minor sicknesses, fever or cold or diarrhea, and I was very it was very saddening even for myself to see that this was happening in our own country, and and what was more saddening was and what was really sad was not only this was happening, but all my people, the majority of the people, we all majority of us are Buddhists, we're supposed to have metta and guna, but people don't have that, they didn't have that with the Rohingya, and there was a big, I really couldn't understand why, why there was this, huge mistrust and all that. Yeah. So I was, I wanted to in that story, I really wanted to try and tell the story in a way that, it's some, from a universal point of view, something that many people can relate to, yeah, it was quite tough, working on this.
Yeah, that's interesting you say that, because I was in the country during that period as well. And that was the thing that stands out to me, was that as people know, and as we talked before this interview, my background, so much of it is from the monasteries, the meditation, the different traditions. And one of the things that really blew me away when the Rohingya crisis hit was the lack of compassion, the lack of metta. And I felt like even if one is holding on to a different reality or arguing that this didn't happen in this way, it happened in this way instead, there's a way to say, well, we in terms of how the conflict has developed, I hold on to my view, and I think this is where the media is missing it. But you can express that while still having a basic compassion for human suffering and having the metta manifest in a way that you recognize that a fellow human being, not even human being, you could just say a fellow living organism in the world was suffering, and that someone who had spent their whole life cultivating metta and wisdom did not want this suffering to proceed. And I was really startled by how seldom I was able to find that view expressed. And even if one knows the traditional way that the Buddha encourage metta to be spread, and the way that it's still done at monasteries, where you start with a respected person, then you go to you go on to a neutral person, and etc. You go down the line. Eventually, you try to send metta even to someone you have difficult feelings with, and not seeing that practiced was really shocking. Even, as I say, even if one is going to hold the different views of what happened when and to whom, and if they're really a citizen or not, leave all that aside, but just having the basic human, or you could say the overtly Buddhist, compassion for a fellow human, regardless of the circumstances. And it's interesting that in your work, you tried to cover an angle that would perhaps bring this out. And we're not going to discuss exactly the specific story you did cover, because that would be a bit too specific in terms of what you were working on and the nature of it. But suffice it to say, I did see it, and I completely see how what you were covering was really a basic element of people's emotional and individual stories universally across time and space and religion and culture and such. I didn't know that was being done intentionally to want to encourage some kind of metta or compassion to take place, but I can certainly see that now. What was the reaction? Did you feel that it did have that impact, that it did awaken in some people some sense of compassion and metta that had been absent before?
Yeah, no, it did. Actually, it was when I was showing this work in many different places, especially within the country, and it was actually like shown in in public places, and as a projection, and I could see that, like, despite the story being about Rohingya, I could feel that the reaction, there was a very like emotional reaction from the people, and that point, it looks like they have forgotten, the whole like debate about Rohingya or Bengali, or all these like terms and words and historical stuff, and where they were just focused on what's like happening, like what the story is about. And it's because it was about, like, it was, anybody could relate to, like, to the story, where it's
Mm-hmm.
about, it's about like family reunions, or like connections, and so it's when so I felt that I could I was really satisfied with that work, actually, because I've covered a lot of stories in the about the Rohingya, but that was the one work where I felt that it was quite good for the people to see, because I mean, like, because there was a lot of reportage by the mainstream media on the Rohingya, and it's every time it's always like the victims and everything, but in their story, like, it's something that Myanmar people could also relate. So in that sense, I think it was a different reaction, and I think it's a more positive, a more hopeful one.
That's great. That's great to hear that reaction. And just a couple other things to touch upon before we get to the events since February 1st. You referenced at the very beginning of the conversation that you had the chance to follow Aung San Suu Kyi on the campaign trail early on, and that this was, I mean, she's obviously, at this point, she was a democracy icon. But personally speaking, you mentioned how she was just beloved in your family. So and at this point, you're basically a nobody. You're just holding a camera up, just trying to get a good shot, trying to figure out what you're doing with your life and your profession, and being in proximity to her. So what was that experience like of being closer to someone that was somewhat of a living legend in that time, and trying to capture these pictures? And then in later periods, did you have more chances to photograph her as she became more of a public figure?
Well, I think, yeah. So when I photographed this 2012 by-election campaigns, it was something really very special for me, and it was also special for me, like, to witness myself as somebody who who's Myanmar and who grew up in Myanmar. But we like for when I was a child, I remember like I remember that, stories about how, it's even dangerous to have like a little picture of Aung San Suu Kyi or General Aung San in your wallet. It's not like that's not very it's a safe thing. So when I actually had the chance to see her like out there with, and it was like a reunion, it was many, like there was, these like large groups of people, actually like all around the country, like different, different ethnic groups and different people, when they were like welcoming her as she comes to do the by-election campaigns. And, it was something really special, and I think that's also what made me want to like continue with this work. Like it's it's not just about her or it's all the opening up of the country, but I could see something really hopeful. As also for the country, it was like just because it was just opening up, and so it was really special. But then like over the years, it's there was like it felt like we were like challenged with or tested with all these like different multiple different issues, like the Rohingya, and then the like anti-Muslim sentiment across the country, and then all this ultra like nationalist groups, and so it's all like several different issues came along, and so when I photographed her again in 2015, and I felt that it becomes different, and even the election campaign, it was still very strong. Like people, like very, people show a lot of people like support her, and almost the whole country support her, but it was not like that reunion that I photographed in 2012. Now it's a lot more complicated. And there's a lot of layers and a lot of, so it was different. Yeah.
That's very interesting. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And the last thing I want to mention before we get to current events, you had just mentioned to me before we went into interview about going to Paok Monastery in Piolin, and some backstory there. And this is not an importance of topic like the other three, but having a background of before the coup, at least, this was a platform that went into a lot of Buddhism stories, and we still have a lot of meditators listening. I think this will be a nice thing to include about your experiences at PAOK and who you photographed there.
Yeah, so I had this assignment to make a portrait of this architect, and I was when my editor told me the place to go, I was quite surprised, because this architect is a Vietnamese architect, and he's actually a really well-known architect, and he has like a big architecture firm in Ho Chi Minh City. And but then he is like where I was when my editor said oh, you should go to this Buddhist monastery to photograph this architect, I thought maybe did he build the monastery? But actually no, he's just he's meditating there, and he has spent 2 years in this monastery meditating, and it was really interesting to see someone that committed, because when you're a successful professional an architect, and when you have that sort of a firm, I'm sure you must be busy. But when I talked to him, he was saying, at my firm, it's when I recruit architects to work at my firm, or the first thing he says is that they have to meditate 1 hour before going to work, and and everybody has to meditate if they want to work at this firm. So he's really committed to meditation, and his wife and also his child also joins him at the Buddhist monastery, and they would join the meditation as well. So he spends most of the year in Paok than at his company. So it's really amazing. Yeah.
Wow, that's great. And did you personally or your family have much of a background in Buddhism or meditation?
Well, yeah, like when I was in high school, like at my school, our headmaster would always, the principal of the school would always like ask us to meditate, like at least like 10, 15 minutes in the morning every day. Yeah, so that's, I had a bit of practice back then. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, great. So moving on now to a more serious topic, looking at the coup since February 1st and some of the work that you've done since the coup was initiated in February. So just looking general at first, when the coup broke on the morning of February 1st and you're a photojournalist, I'm sure in your mind you start, like everyone, to reorient yourself of what does this mean, what's going to happen next, and then perhaps several hours or several days later, where do I fit into this? Who am I going to become? What am I going to do? So take us through that kind of internal mental formulation in the hours or days after that happened.
Well, so I learned about the coup like at 6 a.m. in the morning when I got a call from my colleague at the New York Times. Like she called me and she said, like, there's been a coup in your country. Like she's calling from another country, and I was like, I couldn't believe it, because we knew that this might happen, but then I thought like, okay, this would be like very like stupid to, for something like that to happen. And I couldn't believe it. But then the first reaction for me was like, it wasn't about my work, or, it wasn't about how I was going to cover it. I immediately went to my social media and went to my phone, and I just like clean up. I deleted all the, sensitive stuff that I've posted in the past. And and then I also like clean up my place, yeah, I just wanted to make sure, at that point, I wasn't sure, I wanted to prioritize my safety and the safety of my family first. And then, so I had to clean up the house. And after that, like we went out to get some money at the ATM machines. There's like always, all these like long lines of people. And then it was the scenes on the street was like very chaotic, because I could see that many people were also just like me, like they couldn't believe that this has happened, and people were not sure what's going to happen, what is it going to be like, so I could see like elderly elderly people, like also like grabbing like rice and eggs and oil and whatever they can, like to stock at home. So that was the scene, and I wanted to photograph that, but at the same time I had to do like what I need to do for my family as well, because I'm also part of this. And also I wasn't sure whether at that stage I wasn't sure whether my profession is like still exists, safely or not. But then like by midday, after I've done what I needed to do for home, there was a scene that I wouldn't forget. Like I was, there was some music, some proper, like some songs playing, like loud music. It was the pro-military songs and nationalist songs, and there was like these like hundreds of people, a group of people like walking out of this place, and they were all, it was in a line, and they were all like kind of cheering and marching in a celebratory like feeling. That was when I saw that, I felt it was really like eerie, and it was it was really strange. And that moment I just started like taking pictures. I didn't care, and then I just started taking pictures of these people, these pro-military supporters, and then I started like taking, and that at that point I said, okay, I gotta document this, I gotta take pictures. And then I replied to my editor, who since early morning asked me if I want to work with them, and I said, I'm gonna work. And since that day, I started photographing the coup and the protests, the events that follow for the next 2.5 months, 3 months. Yeah, every day I was on the streets photographing the events that followed.
So in your previous work, you were going to places like the Jade mines and the Rohingya camps and other places where there are some really bad things happening in society to disadvantaged people, vulnerable people that you were there trying to document and to bring back not only to the world, but to your own people back in the cities and Bamar society. And now you find yourself in a place where your own society, your country, your community, everything is unraveling month by month, day by day, and you're documenting it as a photojournalist. So what was that experience like to be so close and personal, to not be an outsider in someone else's situation, and perhaps unfortunate set of events, but actually to be a documenter as well as a participant in your own society starting to come apart?
Well, I had to so since the day one. So on the first day I was busy trying to it was all like very confusing, but at the same time I had to deliver my pictures, I had to do my work, and I wasn't sure whether it's like how safe it is to work as a photojournalist or not. It's so I didn't have so much time to think. But then on the second day, I remember people started making, in the evening, the people started making the metal noise campaign, like hitting pots and pans to make the metal noise in the evening. And this was when I felt like, okay, it's really amazing to hear people do that, and to witness this. And I felt like I want to join and participate as well, but at the same time, that's when I had to ask myself, like, okay, do I want to do I want to what do I do? Do I want to be a journalist or photographer who documents this, or do I want to be involved personally as, so that's why I had to kind of draw the line, and I made a decision. I made a decision to just be, objective and neutral. And I just, because it's especially in a story like this, it's really important that I just do my job, because I believe that we have different roles, many different roles to play in this whole thing. And for me, my role is just to document, what happens next. And to do that safely, I need to be ethically, very careful, and with the lines that I might be crossing. So I decided to just document that. So it's very so for example, in the next days or weeks to come, there's moments where there's a lot of people. There was this first couple of weeks of the protests that almost felt like celebrations rather than protests, because it was just so many different groups of people coming together for one cause. And it was, for me, I had a lot of feelings, mixed feelings as well. I would admit, very often I felt the temptation to join, but then at the same time I couldn't do that. When I'm working for a big news organization, and when I want to be a journalist who just does my job, it was quite tough. But then I got used to it. I got as the story gets complicated, as the crackdown started, there was more and more important things happening. And I realized that for me, it's more important to keep photographing what happens. Yeah.
Yeah, and you mentioned wanting to be objective in your work as a photographer, and yet especially in that early period when the coup and the crackdown was happening, it's I think many observers would overwhelmingly feel that there was a definite evil and bad on one side. And so how did you strive to be impartial and objective when one side was just displaying tactics and mindsets and strategies that, for lack of a better word, or maybe there is no better word, at least in my opinion, just pure evil that was coming out of it?
Yeah. It's you're right. They're often very, very, moments, like especially because I like when the crackdown started, it was like very brutal, and it was very, I have never ever seen in my life like something like this happening, in my own country. I mean, I know that there was the 1988 revolution, and there was also like brutal crackdowns back then, but this is for me the first time. There was the saffron revolution in 2007. Back then, it was like it didn't go on for like weeks. It was only for a shorter period of time. It was just for a few days, but this time it went on, and I photographed at least like a few dozens funerals, many people deaths, and many people injured. It's very like I get very emotional, but I for me at these times, I just whenever it gets like difficult like that, like I just keep telling myself, okay, like just try to make the picture, just focus in my viewfinder, and try to capture what's happening, and try to like symbolize in the best way possible of like of the atrocities that was happening, and of course, like there are times where I couldn't, like it's it was too intense that I couldn't keep shooting. Like for example, there was this funeral of a protester that was killed in North Oklahoma, like, and his daughter, 5-year-old daughter, was crying at the funeral. And she it was just a child like crying, but I could see that she understood. She wasn't crying like just like a child. She understood that she her loss, and that like she really understood what was happening. And like at that moment, I had to stop like taking the picture.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned this emotional element of it, because on my side, when you would send me the links of your work so I could prepare for the interview, and I looked through all the different articles and pictures and whatnot, and when I got to the pictures on the coup, I was overwhelmed. I mean, I'd seen these pictures before, some of them probably yours exactly, and some just general, but I haven't seen them for a while, and I started crying during some of the pictures I was seeing. I just broke down in a couple of them, and it just brought back these memories of how it felt at the time of seeing these vulnerable people that just wanted freedom and were just doing whatever they could to resist against an organized military, and to see them wearing cheap plastic hard hats that aren't going to stop anything, and makeshift masks that they're wearing, and whatever, you can't even call it body armor, whatever they kind of patch together in hopes of preventing whatever injury. I mean, it just tore me up seeing this, that that people had to be put in this position, and that these people were they're coming from being bike mechanics or taxi drivers or university students or waiters or businessmen or whatever else they were, and that they're now having to dress themselves and prepare themselves for this absolute cruelty, and these and your pictures do an excellent job. It's somewhat ironic compliment, because it does an excellent job bringing out the pathos and the pain and the suffering of what you're seeing, but just reminding me of the unfairness and the inequity and the rage of seeing these people having to be put in this position, and being so vulnerable, and being captured being so vulnerable against such a terror that was coming at them. And it brought that all back, seeing that. And it also made me reflect on the fact that we're not seeing these pictures today. The terror is not stopping, and the pain and the suffering are not stopping, but we're not, the world's attention was really drawn first by the kind of parade protest atmosphere you mentioned, and then by the crackdown and the terror. But the world's attention was really drawn by the power and the drama of these contrasting pictures, and especially the pictures that just made your heart bleed and made people tear up, and the stories that went behind them. That they were really grabbing the world's attention for a period of time. And that wasn't going to be forever. The world has a very short attention span, but it was speaking. And it made me reflect on the fact that I don't feel like I've seen a picture recently from the protests in Myanmar that have grabbed my emotion in the same way for some time. And that doesn't mean these things are happening. They're just happening outside of a lot of journalists and photojournalists being able to capture it the way it was before. So this is more of the opinion and the feeling of someone who's more removed from this. But this is your country and your profession. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are on the kind of images that were being captured and coming out at that time, and where we are today with that.
Well, it's like during these days, to be honest, I didn't actually have time to really reflect on, on the things that I was seeing every day. And it was because every day, like I was on the streets, I was out there, trying to be at the place that I need to be. So every morning I was wondering, where's the crackdown going to happen? Where's the place? It was almost like I was, it was important for me, to be at the place where it gets most dangerous and deadly. So I would leave home in the early morning, grab my breakfast, and go to different places, and I would to be honest, I was by chance, mostly by chance, I was there at the major places of crackdown, and then I would come back, late in the evening. I would need to edit and I would need to file, so that the pictures get published. And so it carried on like that for like 2.5 months until by mid-April. I remember that's when the protests almost stopped, because it was just getting too deadly. And every time there is a protest, there's like somebody dying, somebody shot and killed. So it was just getting too dangerous, risky. So so there was protesters. There was no more protesters on the streets, and things kind of like quieted down. And that at that moment, I started like feeling, I started having reflections on what I saw over the past weeks. And it's, to be honest, it was quite scary. And because there was also a lot of close calls that I got almost arrested at some point. There was one time when I was photographing a group of protesters, posting a signboard in the center of the city, and I was photographing them, and then I saw 2 military trucks coming, and they and when I saw them, I immediately got onto my car and started the engine. But it was a little too late, because one of the trucks, it bumped my car. It hit my car, to try to stop me from going away. And at that point, I was just thinking, no, I can't be arrested. I can't be arrested. And then I didn't have time to even think. I already, my foot already gas, stepped on the gas to the bottom, and I just drove away, and I managed to escape. But there was other close calls as well. But when I stopped working, I didn't realize all this, how scary it was, or how dangerous or risky it was. But only after I stopped working, and all these things started reflecting. And when there was this eerie normality and silence that I couldn't even photograph, because at that point, in late April and May and the following months, it became almost impossible for us to go out on the streets with a camera. So at that point, I started I'm not I try not to be involved in any other activity rather than my job. So at that point, I become a civilian or journalist who's not working anymore. And that point, I started to get a little scary. Yeah, because even though I didn't do any unlawful thing or any sin, but it felt like I've done things that are wrong. But I was probably just being paranoid as well.
Yeah, well, that feeling that you're doing something wrong, I mean, that's the self-censorship of a totalitarian society that you start to rein yourself in. And, I was in Myanmar for many years before the transition, and although I'm privileged in being a foreigner and not having the same level of by any means of danger as a local Burmese, I did spend years having to watch everything I did, every conversation I had, everything I threw in the trash can, every electronic communication, every phone conversation, everything that was done, every conversation that was done in a public place. And there was this really strange feeling of living in a totalitarian state where if I would constantly have this balance of, on one hand, feeling if I wasn't talking about certain things that I wanted to say, or I was censoring myself too much, I would feel kind of cowardly and silent. And then the minute that I crossed over that line and started to say something, anything, even something very small, I would feel guilty and a little bit nervous that I had gone too far. And it was like I was either on one side or the other. I either felt guilty and nervous, or I felt cowardly and silenced. And I just had to realize, well, this is kind of the experience that comes in living in a place like this, where you have to censor and watch every single thing you do, and you start to take responsibility for I would start to feel kind of bad or guilty about things that should not be an issue in any other country in the world, but you just internalize this kind of dysfunctional logic here.
Right. Yeah. No. It's exactly, and but then at the same time, like it was for me, like it was just it's my I just have to deal with it. I have to deal with it myself, and I just have to make sure that I'm ready. When I can like photograph again, and when things happen that I can document again. And at the same, and after that, like we had like COVID in July, in June and July, and because the past year we had COVID as well, but it wasn't that serious compared to many other countries. And this year we had like a really very scary like COVID episode, and that was like that kind of distracted everything away, because everybody got sick. Like my parents got sick, my sister got sick.
Yeah.
And, I don't know and almost anyone like who doesn't have a family member sick at home. So then it got all of us like distracted away for a month or two there. So it's but then I think it was after luckily we survived it, and but like it's we had a rough year.
Yeah. To say it lightly, and tagging on to my reaction, the emotional reaction I had looking at your pictures recently of February, March, that happened in the same week that something else happened that was quite interesting to reflect on these together. That we have close friends who were nuns, and soldiers climbed the walls of the nunnery at midnight, and they stormed into the nunnery and attacked. Based on someone who had informed on them for some association or something that who knows, but they stormed in at midnight. They were not wearing uniforms, and they just had normal clothes and weapons. And when the head nun asked them who they were, why they were there at midnight, they just started hitting her over the head with the gun, and they started attacking the other nuns. And these images and videos were sent to me as we were trying to help them with medical and the trauma. They're about 15 young nuns, ranging from 6-7 years old in a nunnery, who were completely traumatized by seeing their caregiver treated like this. But the images and the videos came to us, and they were it's hard even describing this. I mean, it was so bad, but images of the nuns' robes that were taken off and put on the floor later and photographed, and it was just this dark crimson red all over the robes. And seeing that contrast along with the videos of the screaming, the yelling, the shooting, the beating, as one friend who's been in conflict zones told me, it's actually worse to hear someone else being beaten than to be beaten yourself. And so this and this also, this single picture of this nun, these pink nuns' robes covered in blood laying on the floor, this also, as your pictures, just drove me to tears. And knowing the story behind it, not just the picture, but knowing the story behind it, it was so. And so this made me reflect. Like I know these things are happening. I deal with. I'm involved every day with as much as I can from being abroad and helping in any way I can. And yet somehow, seeing this single picture and knowing the story behind it affected me in ways that I hadn't been affected for months and months, just touched some part of me that just drove, the motivation, the anger, the tears, just everything. And it sounds simple and obvious to say, but it's just that a single image does so much, and of course, Vietnam War was, they're images that will live in the American mindset forever of how they're just burned and etched in our memory of certain things that were able to be caught. And so both of these things, your early pictures and this recent incident with the nuns, it makes me reflect on the role that photojournalism can play and the need to, in some ways, it feels kind of unfortunate because like you have to go to places as a photojournalist where you expect evil to transpire. You have to go to places where you expect people to be brutally attacked and worse, possibly killed. And you have to try to take these pictures of the worst possible suffering and tragedy, and yet these are the images that will speak to people somehow. Simply knowing what is happening, hearing the stories and hearing the information, hearing the data or the details of operation or things that are happening, somehow a single image can still change the course of history. And so you cannot underestimate the importance of getting these images that can turn public opinion somewhere else, not to suggest miracles, but that can at least raise the level of awareness or engagement or involvement in seeing something so terrible transpire that just doesn't, that just can't happen without seeing that image. And so I wonder what your thoughts are on this being your profession, of that contrast, of the importance of of finding these kind of images as they happen, documenting the reality, and yet the tragedy of having to to document something that is just terrible for everyone involved, for the experience of it happening, and for everyone to have to witness it happening. And when I shared the pictures of the nun's robe and blood on my social media, it went viral to a small degree, at least as far as my platform is. And it was that kind of feeling, like I have shared something that no one is going to like to see, that everyone is going to feel pain with. And yet this has to be shared for them to feel like I do. And so I'm wondering what your thoughts are on all that.
Well, of course, like there were so many different things, evil, like bad things happening in many different places. And I could only go to one place at a time, and so it's and we had there were many photographers and photojournalists. It's not just me, many other photojournalists were working as taking as the same risk, if not more, as me, and we were all trying to tell do our job in different places and trying to capture what was happening. But for me, it's really important to it's not just capturing what's happening in front of you, or just pressing the shutter button. It's also to try and you see all these suffering, atrocities, tragedy, brutal crackdowns. But if the picture, for me, it's really important to get the picture which really summarize or in a way symbolize, symbolize the event that happened. It's not just a picture of the event. It's also it's to I really need to try and make like pictures that will be like iconic for what was happening, or for that would visually symbolize what was happening, the courage of the people and the suffering, the crackdown, the deaths, and so for each topic, for each angle of the story, I needed one, like, I mean, of course I was taking like thousands of pictures every day, hundreds and thousands, but I would, in the end, it's important for me to like have like one picture that would tell the best of like, okay, the protests, the battles, and then the killings, the deaths, the funerals, the nighttime like candlelight vigils. And so I need to have like one picture that's strong for each topic. And that was quite, but but then the difference this time is like it's like unlike the previous revolutions the country had, it's this time like everybody has a mobile phone and everybody can take pictures. So even if it's not a professional like me or my colleagues, it's really amazing, and really I think it's really good that we are still seeing pictures even in these times and these months, these recent months, where like it's very difficult for professional photojournalists or journalists to go and take pictures in places. Like we're still seeing pictures from even like very remote areas of the country. It's of course like thanks to the mobile phones and technology. So it's, and also the people who can who know that when they see something happening they should document it. So it's really I think it's really good that this is still being documented.
Yeah, sure. And you referenced one of the pictures that you took that really struck you and stayed with you was this funeral of a father and the 5-year-old who seemed to have some awareness of what was happening. Are there any other pictures that from that period that really have stayed with you till today?
Well, there was this picture of the protest. It's from the early days on, when like it was near the city hall in Yangon, and like there was like a line of policemen just standing guard, and there's barricades, and on the other side of the barricades it's all these people like protesting and shouting, and actually like they were all these people. This was the early days, maybe like a couple of weeks. No, not like only a few days from since the protest started. And it was the moment when like many people were shouting like people's police, and trying to convince the police to stand with the people instead of like following orders from the military. And I think like that picture really kind of stayed with me as well, because it really kind of symbolizes the protest that was happening. People were actually trying to convince the police to be with them. I thought that was really special, really interesting. Well, yeah, no, and then there was a lot of a lot of funerals and stuff, but then also one picture of the crackdown, which is with there's this picture with all this like smoke and tear gas, and then like protesters are like defending back with like firecrackers and fire extinguishers. So that scene is also like quite remarkable for me. Yeah.
So you've said before that you're not into being political, meaning like abdicating the right and wrong of things, but rather showing the impact of policies. You made that reference before the coup regarding the work you were doing with Rohingya, jade mines, everything else. I'm curious if that mindset still animates your work today with the coup, or have you taken on a different feeling with the work you're doing?
Well, I just know that so for me, since the early days, I had to think okay, what do I want to what's the most important thing for me? And it's firstly in this situation, I think to like, to be able to do my work safely. It's like the priority. And, for the safety of my family, of course, like, and I think it's just like, it's more than like what I feel personally this time. I feel because I'm also part of the story. Like even though I'm just like I'm just doing my work as a photojournalist, I'm also part of the story because it also affects me and my family and my friends and my environment. So it's like it's impossible to say I'm not like personally involved, but at the same time, like for my job, it's just like when the authorities or when the military they want to like accuse like journalists, when they arrest like journalists, what they want to say is that journalists are not just like doing the job but also like involved and doing more than the journalists should do. But for that reason I have to be like very careful with with the limits and with the way I work and what the activities that I do. I just try. This is all like it's very important for me because I want to be able to keep working.
Yeah. So moving today and getting caught up to speed, you were the unanimous winner at the Bayeux War Correspondence Award. This was launched after Normandy and Normandy invasions. The press came along and was able to photograph and record that. And it's really an award that celebrates the freedom of the press, especially in under difficult circumstances. And you're the unanimous winner of this prestigious award, and yet you could not publicly accept the honor. You couldn't even be named for it. What was it like having to accept this award anonymously for all of the hard work that you've done and not be able to reveal your name with it?
Well, it was quite weird. I mean, I've had like a few awards before, and it's but this is the first time I've had it like anonymously, and but actually, I mean, of course, it's like it's a bit like weird, and but more importantly, I think I think it's better this way, and I'm prouder because I'm anonymous, but it's not just. I feel that it's not just me. The prize is being awarded to, like, because there's all these like other photojournalists, Myanmar photojournalists, like who have been like risking a lot and who every day face like life risk, and despite all the risk, like they keep going there and we're working, and so we all share the same risk, and everybody work as best as we can to to tell a story, to document this. So I think the anonymity kind of it's important in that way, that it kind of represents not just me as one photographer, but it's, even though it's the award is for my work, but it represents like all the other like fellow journalists, fellow photographers and photojournalists back home who've been like doing their work as much as I've been doing.
Yeah, right. That's really a beautiful answer, and recognizing the achievements and the sacrifices that others have made in the profession I imagine it must be somewhat strange to disassociate yourself with a career you've worked so hard for and built up, and at this time the work you're doing has to be separated with everything you've actually done to get to this point.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, I'm just happy that I can. I'm just happy that like the anonymity also helps me to be in a way to keep staying safe, and when the time and opportunity comes for me to be able to keep working, and for me that's the most important thing right now. Just like it's to keep being able to stay safely and try and work when I can. That's a priority.
Okay, so at the moment, you're outside of Myanmar. You've received this very prestigious award, and you're choosing to go back into the country knowing the dangers and the conflict and continue your profession. Can you share a bit about your thinking and your reasoning of why you're choosing to go back into a conflict zone and continue on the work of documenting it?
Well, I think so like I really I needed to come out because not because I wanted to like run or escape from it, but it was more because I needed a break, and I felt like I needed a distance from because I was too much inside the story and too much part of the story, and for a few months I couldn't I wasn't able to photograph anything, so I think it was important for me to take a fresh fresh perspective, but then I realized it's because I see that there's still some chance for me to go back and to try and maintain my safety, and like to try and I just have to find a new approach to keep telling the story. So whenever there's still a chance, like I really want to take it and I really want to go back, and that's why I'm hoping to go back to Myanmar and as soon as I can, and I plan to be there as long as I can live there, like safely, to keep working as a photographer. Yeah.
I see. We really wish you the best of luck and safety in going back there, and continue to support you and everyone and all we can from this platform, and want to thank you for coming on. But more importantly, just want to thank you for your work of documenting the reality that you're seeing, that as I've referenced in my emotional reaction to seeing things I already knew, and this emotional reaction to this picture of the nuns' robes in blood, that there is, I'm sure I don't have to tell you this, there is a power in the image, and your work in documenting and capturing that power of the image in what you've already done and what you're going on to do and the sacrifices you're making in doing so. You are bringing the reality of the scene to so many people and touching them in ways you'll probably never know. And for those that have been moved by that, it's a thank you and a recognition from so many for being able to do that work.
Well, no, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak inside Myanmar as well. Yeah.
After today's discussion, it should be clear to everyone just how dire the situation is in Myanmar. We are doing our best to shine a light on the ongoing crisis, and we thank you for taking the time to listen. If you found today's talk of value, please consider passing it along to friends in your network. And because our nonprofit is now in a position to transfer funds directly to the protest movement, please also consider letting others know that there is now a way to give that supports the most vulnerable, and to those who are especially impacted by this organized state terror. If you would like to join in our mission to support those in Myanmar who are resisting the military coup, we welcome your contribution in any form, currency, or transfer method. Every cent goes immediately and directly to funding those local communities who need it most. Donations go to support such causes as the Civil Disobedience Movement, CDM, families of deceased victims, and the purchasing of protective equipment and medical supplies. Or if you prefer, you can earmark your donation to go directly to the guest you just heard on today's show. In order to facilitate this donation work, we have registered a new nonprofit called Better Burma for this express purpose. Any donation you give on our Insight Myanmar website is now directed to this fund. Alternatively, you can visit our new Better Burma website, which is betterburma.org, and donate directly there. In either case, your donation goes to the same cause, and both websites accept credit cards. You can also give via PayPal by going to paypal.me/betterburma. Additionally, we can take donations through Patreon, Venmo, GoFundMe, and Cash App. Simply search Better Burma on each platform and you'll find our account. You can also visit either website for specific links to those respective accounts, or email us at info@betterburma.org. In all cases, that's Better Burma, one word, spelled BETTERBURMA. If you would like to give in another way, please contact us. Thank you so much for your kind consideration.